Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MIDC's Walks and Talks series. I'll be your host this afternoon. The topic of the talk will be creating value faster. Giving the talk today is our special guest, Jamal Wick and Jona Marku from Bespoke Industries. Jamal is the managing director and Jona is the creative and design director. Bespoke Industries, for those who don't know, is a Dubai-based group that designs, fabricates, and installs bespoke modular solutions, as well as trailers, mobile units, and pop-up tents. Welcome, Jona and Jamal.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having us today. It's a pleasure to be on this panel and to be able to share some insights on the modular and construction industry. Firstly, I'd like to make this as entertaining as possible, so feel free to jump in or take over the floor, whether Mark or our guests. Jona here is our architect and designer that is a specialist in modular construction, has joined us earlier this year from Europe. But I'd like to speak firstly of the statistics from a report of McKinsey on the modular construction. This is going to be an industry that's over $130 billion by 2030, as per the McKinsey report of 2018, saving per year $22 billion thanks to the modular construction versus conventional. And finally, the speed timeline whereby the production can be cut by 20 to 50%. So I think these are statistics that are quite self-explanatory, and the idea here today is to share my insights on our current projects, what we have done in the past, and hopefully convince you that modular construction is the future of construction. I'd like to share my screen quickly to show you a slide that I think is quite interesting. Are you able to see my screen, Mark?
We do see it now.
Okay, so this is a screen that that shows the cost of build for a typical 5-star hotel, a typical 4-star hotel, a typical 3-star hotel, and then raw hotels and resorts, which is our operating arms for hotels at $75,000 per key versus a typical build of $550,000 plus for luxury. So we're comparing here the cost per key in USD versus the build time per month, the GOP percentage as a hotel operator and profitability, and finally the staff requirement per key. So if you look at this, you quickly understand that the modular construction, which is under the raw hotels and resorts label here, first of all has a very interesting per key ratio of builds. Secondly, the time of build of projects are, I would say, usually between 4 to 6 months, depending on the complexity and the size of the project. Thirdly, the GOP here as a management company, we're looking at, let's say, a 3-star boutique brand. So you have higher GOP because you have a very lean structure and management operating arm. And finally, the staff requirement per key is 0.5 versus 2 staff for luxury hotels. So I just wanted to share this screen with you and you know, kind of tell you that there is definitely financial interest in the modular construction. Secondly, if you look at project timeline, we're able to reduce timeline from 20 to 50% compared to conventional construction. And this is also statistics that have not made up specifically for this talk, but that are through articles like McKinsey and consultants that are experts in the field of research. Other areas that are very interesting is the carbon footprint. Today, as an example, we're working on a UNESCO protected site, whereby carbon footprint and sustainability is of great importance to the developer and the client, and they cannot afford to have a conventional construction of 500 people on site doing foundation and concrete slabs and all of this. So for specific projects that are difficult in terms of accessibility or that are looking for low carbon footprint, I think that the modular solution is of great importance. In terms of scalability and repeatability, I think these are important terms to look at. Once we have a design freeze on a specific room or in a specific accommodation, we're able to reproduce that at a very fast-tracked pace and 30, 40, 100 of them in parallel, because you have that sort of sign-off on your mock-up. Then you can just achieve scalability by being able to reproduce, the entire amount of keys required for the project. So these are some of the important factors that I wanted to share with you from the eyes of a manufacturer and an entrepreneur. From a design perspective, Jona, I'd like to let you share your opinion and just give us some thoughts of what and why is architecture and design important in modular and slightly different than in conventional construction.
Yeah, thank you, Jamal. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. As Jamal said, I recently joined Bespoke Industries. Previously, I worked in Europe on modular construction, and before that, I worked on big architecture companies, so I know very well the difference between working on a traditional design and a modular design. Back in Europe, I was working with modular constructions, not only in Europe, but also in the US and Scandinavia and including UAE. So I have noticed the repeatable design on like all different continents, not only in Europe. And what's very important is that the design has to be finalized, and you have to really freeze everything from the very beginning in a very early stage, because once that is finalized and the production starts, it's very difficult to make changes, which I think that a lot of architects and other parties involved don't understand that on a later stage it's very difficult to make such changes, because if we build, for example, 300 units and we make one change at one of the units, we will have to do these changes on the other 299. So that's very, very important in the beginning. So in the beginning, it requires a lot of coordination and design, but once that is set up, it's very easy to control the quality, because as Jamal said, once you approve the first unit, which we call the mock-up, then you know exactly the quality you're going to get on the other 300 units. So it's really easy to assure the quality of these units and of course deliver the best quality to the client. Regarding the design itself, we are more limited than in traditional construction because we have to transfer the units to the site of the building itself, which means that we have to consider the maximum width of the units, which is usually around 3.5 meters. Noticing these limitations, the modular construction is usually the best way of building for repeatable units, such as hotels or student housings or even private residential units, but where it's not like a big open space, because in that way it would be difficult to make units that have a very big width. And so this would be the initial thoughts of the design of the modular construction. And then later on, it's like, I think a lot of contractors start to understand better the way it works, so it's easier, but the beginning is quite challenging, but so far we've done it pretty well, I think.
Thank you, Jona. I think during difficult times that we're in, post-COVID, people are looking for different approaches to construction, and speaking on behalf of myself, that obviously is in touch with multiple developers, government entities, and I will speak on behalf of the eyes of the end user, the clients. Developers nowadays are looking for faster build solution, quicker returns, less risk-driven projects in construction. And I think I've seen quite an interesting curve in the past 6 months, pre and post-COVID, of developers that are interested to venture in a less risky manner, and obviously with tighter financial budgets allocated to construction. And yes, that has been good for us that are in the industry. However, it's difficult also when you hear, I want to build cheap and hence I want to build modular. I don't think that these are right synonyms that are meant to be together. The build of modular construction, I mean, my chart showed, you know, a 3-star boutique modular build solution, but it's possible to build a 5-star luxury hotel in a modular. It all depends in construction about materials that are allocated obviously to the project. Now in design and construction, times equals to money. And the beauty of modular construction is that the client wants you to finish your project as soon as possible for his faster returns and ROIs. And we want to get rid of projects as soon as possible to empty up the space in the factory. So there's an interesting approach to speed of build, and obviously the faster we build it and hand it over to the client on site, the faster the client can open and operate the hotel or the development, and therefore start generating money and funds rather than spending 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years in a pre-opening stage of a hotel or of a project, whereby there's obviously a lot of money that's being built during these stages, whether on the site, whether in construction, whether in paying salaries, etc., etc., etc. Now, from the eyes of a consumer, I think that there's an interesting approach to that, and obviously in the times that we are in, the current future of hospitality. I'm a hospitality background person, so I understand a little bit that mindset as well. I used to operate the Kempinski Group from a pre-opening side, and therefore design spaces, construction, and hospitality is my background. But I truly believe that the experiential sides of travelers is going to change in the future, and that clients and travelers are looking for something different than only luxury nowadays. And there's a whole movement called the transformational tourism or transformational clients that is searching for something that is different in experience, for something that can be driven by wellness, by body, mind, and soul in terms of meditation approach, by activities that are in relation with nature, by seeking for a sustainable way of spending your vacation. And I think due to the current situation as well, people are definitely going to travel less. And when they do travel, they will want to make it a point for this trip to be meaningful, whether that is by the beach, whether that is by the desert. But the meaning of traveling will change, and I think that people will be searching for an experiential, transformational sort of movement in traveling. And that, from the eyes of a consumer, at least, I think this is extremely important. And I mean, just look at the domestic traveler nowadays in the UAE. You try to book a room in any of the retreat hotels that have a standalone villa by the beach or a standalone cabin with a plunge pool. They're driving rates of $2,500 and up, which is $500-600 a night. And these are hotels that were maybe not driving these rates earlier. And domestic travelers are going to continue being, I think, attractive to the hospitality sector in the region. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, the eyes of the end consumer and give you an insight on what I'm seeing and the current trends. Mark, if I may share my screen just to run a little bit through a couple of the units that we're currently presenting as products.
Go ahead and share it, Jamal, and then so we'll actually put it on the live event for you.
Sure. Can you see my screen, Mark?
I can see your screen. Yep, it's on now.
Great.
You're live.
So Bespoke Modular Solution is our modular construction company. We drive products through obviously modular for hospitality and residential, and now we're getting into restaurant and F&B. We also, through our sister company Bespoke Trailers, work extensively in hospitality, utilizing old shipping containers. That has been more of a trend in the region, but this is something that we have done a lot in the past 4 years for big development, for government entities, for hotels, for restaurants. And another product that we have is the dome, which I will run you and show you through the presentation. These are very interesting sort of, I would say, back to basics kind of experiential solutions for hospitality developers. And finally, the tents, the safari tent and the YURT, which is also in the same category than in the domes. So we've created 3 off-the-shelf hospitality units. Liwa Oasis is the first one. These are some of the renders and the spaces inside. Jebel Vista is our second one. And thirdly, Arabian Sands. And obviously in modular, what's important is that you try to stick to a certain design look and feel off the shelf, let's say, whereby people can choose a design A, B, or C, whether based on the layout or based on the budget, and then we can work around these design rather than every single time redesigning from scratch, you know, the units based on every request that we're getting. So these are residential units, the modular and basic and the modular luxury. So you can see here the 3 sort of the 2 columns in the middle, which are basically the 1, 2, and 3 modules that are sealed together. This is the modular luxury. So this slide shows a comparison of traditional construction schedule versus modular solution delivery schedule. And as we discussed before, we can achieve timelines of 20 to 50% in terms of reducing construction timeline, because while the site is being prepared with, you know, whether it's with utilities, excavation and preparation, we are at the factory already building the module from structural to MEP to first fix, second fix, and we're obviously gaining in time whereby we're able to produce the units off-site in a temperature controlled environment instead of, you know, the regular conventional construction, which has first site preparation and then building and construction start. So we see a reduction of delivery time by 40%, quicker generating revenue, and therefore a cost reduction by 20 to 35%. These are some of our containers. So this is a 30-foot container and a 40-foot container that are sort of put together under design sort of shading structure, allowing for seating space on a deck with a plunge pool. Then we have the container residential single-story units. This is an F&B container where we've created a sort of seating space on top of the container and then a terrace. Medical containers. These are the domes that I mentioned earlier, and this is our hospitality dome. So it's usually placed on a sort of decking system as well. And the beauty of this is that you have a really great interaction with the outdoor space. There's a sort of a stargazing ceiling that you can open and have literally an open roof. And it's really a very interesting module in terms of the products that we're offering. Some interiors look and feel. We're also using them for events, and the beauty of these units is that they can be put together in half a day and dismantled. So for a mobile solution, I think this is a great solution, and maybe a developer today wants to build a 40-room hotel on a site, 5 years later decides to build a tower on the site and therefore wants to remove these units. The domes is a very good, let's say, flexible dismantling solution. And finally, the tents. The region is quite familiar with Bedouin tents, and I think that this is where the inspiration of all these projects and interest in the tents has come from. So here the build of the unit is built from a modular perspective, and then finally the tent is used as a shading space for the roof. So some spaces from inside. A different approach, which is the YURT tent. Again, this is very kind of back to basic and experiential traveler that's looking for a real nature and sustainable solution. Also very easy to dismantle. So Mark, yeah, these are the different products that we're currently developing and working on. Most of our business, I would say, is in the GCC between the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar. Obviously, the modular construction, as I mentioned before, is of great interest as well for seasonality. And seasonality in Saudi Arabia is a very big sort of a project depending on each city. And the idea in Saudi is to offer a solution whereby we can utilize these units for the period of 4 months or 6 months, pack them up, take them to another city, rebuild kind of the solution, whether for F&B, hospitality, etc. So Mark, I don't know if you have any questions for us or how you'd like to take this further, whether you'd like me to continue speaking of what we're currently doing.
No, it sounds great. It's great to hear you're explaining what you're up to. If you do want to continue speaking about it, feel free, but we have a ton of questions for you as well. So up to you if you want to start the questions now or if you want to finish speaking about something in particular first.
I think, as I said before, I think from the eyes of developers, we see a lot of interest on a more affordable solution and quicker built solution. And that I'm talking about, government entities all the way down to small private shareholders. We're seeing a lot of interest at the Expo site as well for modular construction, whereby the Expo, we all know, is going to be a 6 months project, and having to return the site as impeccable as it was before receiving it. We're currently in great talks and relations with the Expo for some pavilions and other sorts of solutions. I think as I mentioned before, the market is looking at a more affordable luxury, I think, is a good terminology of what consumers are looking for, rather than spending 3,000-4,000 dirham a night, potentially spending 1,000, 1,500 and making it an experiential kind of travel experience. And finally, no, I think, I'm not sure if anybody has questions or if you would like to ask us anything, Mark.
Absolutely. I'll just get into the questions then. So I'll start at the latest one. There's a question that says, we know modular construction boasts about its efficiency and affordability, but in terms of the aesthetic, what is the process in terms of the design thinking and the architecture to try and not fall into the prefab aesthetic category? Or do you consider that an issue?
Jamal, you want to reply to this?
I can respond to that. Yeah, so I think Jamal already mentioned it, that back in the days, people used to, when you would mention modular construction, people used to think about, I don't know, social housing, for example. In the US, a lot of social houses are made prefab and stand there in like a very, very low quality. But right now, I mean, when I worked back in Europe, we were producing, or like the partner was producing the AC Marriott Hotel in Manhattan. And I don't think that's a low quality project. That's a super high-end project, done everything, produce everything offsite and then shipped to New York. So if we compare it to such a project, it already tells us about the quality. We're using all the like best brands. We try to collaborate with the best brands that are very resistant and that the finishes are nice. And of course, we consider also the trends that are in the design. So it's not I don't know, an affordable modular house. It's actually, it can be quite high end. The only thing that is modular is the way that we ship it. So like we produce it offsite and then we ship it to the site. Everything else is, it's similar process like a traditional normal architecture company that would do. We just have to like speed it up very much in the beginning so that we can start with the production. That is all, I think, in my experience, the differences between the traditional construction and the modular.
Okay.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think also from just to add on what Jona said, from a material sample and selection, it's very important to make sure that the materials that we choose are resistant to movement, because again, if you're building it offsite and you're transporting it with a crane and putting it on a truck, or you're flat packing it and shipping it in a container, the last thing you want is for it to arrive to the site and the tiles are cracked and the plywood is cracked in half. And so these are all things that we're obviously very sensitive about. And to tell you that we're going to pick the cheapest plywood or the cheapest material won't necessarily allow us to be able to reach a good product on delivery to site and hand over to clients. So I think this is another area that's very important, that sometimes we have to pick stronger, more resistant materials to shock because of the movement of the shipping or of the movement, rather than just the conventional construction where you're really building it on site. Mark?
Yeah. Correct.
Fair enough. But how about dimensions and the such? I mean, I understand you're saying the aesthetic. You can choose a much more robust or more refined material for sure. I mean, that's a given. But dimensionally, transportation-wise, sometimes you get a certain sort of stylization due to the limitations, if you want to call it that, of transportation and the like. Do you see that as a factor, or that's not really something that hinders you, or that's just something that you're creative about solving in terms of what your limitations are by most of the transportation, I suspect?
Sure. So I can answer this question. So you have two options of modular. One of them is the flat pack option, and flat pack means that, let's say we build it here in the UAE, it's shipped in a container to Australia, it arrives to the site, and it's built on site. In the flat pack option, you don't have that problem because it's not prefabricated. It's flat packed in a container, and the container is taken to the site. So you don't necessarily have any limitations. In a prefabricated solution or built methodology, you have to put it at the back of a truck, of a low boat truck. And here, there's certain limitations due to the width of this truck and obviously RTA approvals. So we do have, let's say, limitations of space to work around. However, special permits are also given where you're escorted by police at night, at given hours, etc., you get a permit where you can utilize more than the width that we discussed earlier for that. So to answer your question, Mark, yes, it's a burden, but there's ways to work around it. And to give you an example, if we're building a 2-bedroom cabin, we build the one bedroom separately, the living room separately. They're both shipped on the site and they're sealed on the site, you know? So these are also solutions and ways that we work around this this burden.
Yeah, and regarding build materials, because I think your concern is also the build materials itself. We have the steel structure as like the main structure, and then we have substructure, and then of course we have insulation with like very good thermal conductivities. And then we have the cladding where you can choose different types of materials. I don't know, you can choose at the moment we're using corrugated sheet, you can use aluminium panels, you can use ACM, wooden cladding, especially in Scandinavia, we always had wooden cladding, and it's the same inside. Like the process is the same. You have basically like a sandwich panel wall with the different layers, and then we choose the best materials that, you know, overall gives us a good quality of the overall wall and not just the finish inside.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll move on to another question. We have a lot of them here, so I'll give you something new here. Are the gains on construction timeframes linked solely to faster construction and assembly of the different modules, or are other factors also impacted? Faster design or something of that nature?
I mean, faster design, not necessarily, because if you're comparing apples to apples, building a 50-story hotel, actually the tallest hotel in New York currently is being built modular, but that's a different story. But if you're to design a 50-story modular hotel versus a 50-story conventional traditional hotel, there is no differences in a design. On the contrary, as Jona mentioned, that the design stage in modular is extremely important, because once you have a design freeze, you start production, you can't go back to the drawing board. While in conventional construction, you might, I don't know, start with the underground, the ground floor, you can still make changes on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor.
Exactly.
It's the simple approach to the time saving is due to the fact that once we have a design freeze, we're able to go in parallel up with the 30, 40, 50 units in parallel. So currently we're building 40 structures in parallel for a project, and then we built the 40 floorings together and the 40 MEPs after together, and then the sandwich panels, and then the installations, and then etc. etc. So there's really a very clear sort of scalability approach to production, and hence time saving.
Fair enough. Essentially, adherence to the repetition, if you will, where you're making the savings, the pre-fab units, basically.
Correct.
One more question for you. Your supply chain, is it entirely located in the UAE, or do you have to outsource for supplies externally?
But during COVID, it was quite difficult to get anything shipped to us. So we've managed to pretty much find all types of materials. I mean, in Dubai here, everything is available locally, to be honest. So that is quite an easy exercise. We are working with a lot of European brands. I mean, Jona, you might want to jump in here to talk about more of that. But
sure.
To answer the question, it's we're able absolutely to supply the entire chain of materials and production locally here. We work with specific brands in Europe, but they all have a presence locally here in Dubai, and we're lucky to be in such a, let's say, cosmopolitan city.
Yeah, I agree. Well, of course, we try to supply everything locally, so that, because we also think about the environmental impact. So we would like to supply as much as we could locally, but at the same time, we want to assure the products that we use are high quality. So we try to compromise, get local materials, but at the same time, if we don't find the local material good quality enough, then we compromise with, I don't know, European products or other products. So we do both.
Sure. Or if there's something specifically that you need that's unique, you obviously will have to get it where it's being created or made.
Correct.
So, understood. How are you addressing utilities in remote or temporary locations?
That's a good question. So most of the time, we are a modular construction company that only does the build of the unit itself. We don't have what I call a main contractor division, whereby we also prepare sites and excavations, etc. So from our side, our pre-requirement getting into projects is that we need within, I don't know, 2 or 3 meters distance to each cabin and unit, receive mains directly to each one of the units, and we just have a plug-and-play solution for that. Now, in some specific cases, and because we are into the airstream and mobile, hospitality sector as well, in some cases, we build gray tanks, clear tanks. Obviously, we use a lot of solar panel solutions to generate energy, and that's becoming more and more frequent now. In Europe, there's a certain type of tile that you can use as the roof of a cabin, and that tile is the roof of the cabin and also a solar generating energy solution. The only issue in this region is that at 50 degrees outside, the consumption of air conditioning is extremely strong, and we all know that AC consumes a lot of electricity, but otherwise we're able to generate enough energy with a sustainable solution with very simple kind of materials. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that one. Here's another one for you. When building a small development, is it common to have a range of different modules, or is there just one base module that you're using throughout? Obviously, I'm guessing there are different answers for different solutions, but maybe you can speak to this one.
Sure, I think it's mostly a question of the vision of the developer or the client. It's funny because I asked a specific question to a client that I was speaking to yesterday about the 60-room hotel here coming up in Dubai that we're working on. It's a question of aesthetics mainly. Some clients want one sort of DNA look and feel across the entire hotel. We want it to look tribal, and this is the look and feel of it, and hence we work on one product solution with a 1-bed, 2-bed, 3-bed sort of configuration. In other developments, such as, I don't know, a plot of land in Ajman, we're looking to have a mixed approach, also because of the budget of the client. So we're looking to have some modules, some modular units that are cabins for the 2 and 3 bedrooms, and then for the 1 bedrooms, maybe have the domes or the tents, which are a more affordable solution as well. And also for, as I mentioned, for flexibility, I mean, it's more complicated to dismantle a modular construction. So for a client that wants to, let's say, have 30 cabins in phase A, and then in phase B, he might want to expand, very quickly overnight and add another 20 rooms during the season, So we put there some tents or some domes that are very easily dismantleable and seasonal, and remove them just before the summer, and pack them up and get rid of them or sell them or rent them out or whatever. So I think it's a mix of both, and it's usually based on the vision of the clients.
Fair enough. I guess the question I'd add to that for me would be, it would be reasonable to assume that if I add more modules or types of modules, it would add to the cost, not necessarily directly, one for one. I assume you get an overall savings if you added some modules, but in your experience, what would be the range you would be speaking to? I guess it depends on the size of the project, but if we're talking, say, a hotel or something, could you say you have several different types of modules, 3 to 4, would that be in excess, or would that create a fundamental shift in the savings or the time frame savings? Or is that something that you deal with? Like, is that a normal, something you'd expect, I guess? I would assume you would expect it, but.
Yeah, I understand. So what we try to do is have the layout itself, so like width, length, the same. So like the structural is the same, the length of the panels that we use is the same, but then the layout inside can be different. So we could move the partition walls, we would mirror the bathroom to the other side, or I don't know, we can have a bigger room and 2 smaller rooms on the other unit. So the saving is mainly in the build materials, where it's repetitive, the structure itself, the materials and so on. Of course, it would be a bit more expensive if it's not exactly the same, but not that much more, because if we keep the same layout, then the rest can be easily adjusted.
Yeah, I think, Mark, it gets expensive if you are to go back to the drawing board every time and redesign the configuration of the modules, right? And we talked before about time saving, we talked about scalability, repeatability. So if you're to design 3 different modules, that's 3 times the amount of time that you're gonna, invest into the design phase of the project, instead of having just one specific design that you follow from the beginning until the end.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, we got a bit of a, I'm gonna call it a random question, but are modules commonly designed to be easily refurbished in the future? I suppose that would be, in my opinion, that would be more part of the design process or the thinking, but if you could maybe speak to that one.
I mean, we give 10-year warranties on our builds and on structural, and then 1 year on finishes and materials. Yeah. That has not necessarily an impact on modular versus conventional construction. I don't know, Jona. Yeah. I think it's also related to budget of the project, yeah, exactly. And materials that are selected. Yeah. So cheaper materials will have more wear and tear. Therefore, you might have to, renovate it 5 years down the line instead of 8 or 10. For more, let's say, higher end finishing project, but that's not specific to modular, yeah. In a sort of way, Mark.
Yeah, exactly.
To add some, sorry, I would just like to add that it also depends what kind of a refurbishment it is. If it's just going to be like a replacement of the same materials, or I don't know, you paint or you replace the cladding, or is it going to be changing the layout inside? Because if the client, for example, has a budget and tells us that I want to redesign this layout in 10 years, then we can consider that already in the early design stage and make the MEP design, for example, in a way that it can be changed in 10 years. Let's say. So it's more like the circular economy mentality of like changing the layout. But that has to be discussed from the very beginning with the client, because it also, of course, it comes with an extra cost if you have to do extra cables in the walls so that you can change the layout later on and move the kitchen from one side to the other and so on. But the rest, as Jamal said, it's like just a normal refurbishment, like a traditional building.
Yeah, I think, thank you. That's the answer there. There's not really a difference in terms of the refurbishment process. It's the same as traditional. Yeah. If we're talking about painting the walls or retiling or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's an interesting question for you. Let's see, I just lost it. At Bespoke, do you recycle or repurpose your units or parts of your units from old projects? Do you do any kind of, anything like that?
To be honest with you, for one of the projects, we're currently working with the Supreme Committee for the FIFA World Cup 2022 in Doha, and we're currently looking at a buyback option because we're talking about thousands of units, from modular to tents to domes, at different scales of experiences and budget. And for that specific project, one of the let's say the visions of the committee was to make sure that anything that is built for the fan villages, which is the areas that were mandated to work and collaborate with them, has a sort of sustainable kind of approach to it, that we can remove it, dismantle it, be a multiple purpose units, so we can ship them. As an example, one of them would be to ship them to Africa, to utilize them as schools or to utilize them as medical units. And the other option, obviously, is for us as Bespoke to buy them back and recycle them and utilize them for other projects, other seasons, other tournaments that are happening in the region.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Here's another one for you. What kind of cost per key would be generated by a dome hospitality product, say at a 4-star? A little bit direct, so I'm not sure if you're able to answer that right off the top, but feel free to say you have to think about it.
Key, sorry. So what would a dome generate for a 4-star hotel? Is that?
What kind of cost per key would be generated by a dome hospitality product? So what are you thinking? What are you guys seeing from? How favorable is it? You know.
On the top of my head, and again, obviously, this question is will differ from city to city and location to location and landscape to landscape.
Context to context.
That being said, I'll speak about experience in current projects and feasibilities that we're currently running. In Ajman, we're on a beachfront location. We're looking at an average room rate of $200 a night, and that is taking into consideration low seasonality and high seasonality. So you'd go up to $280 during high season, and you drop down to $160, $170, in low season. And I think something that I talked about before was affordable luxury. I know that there's a lot of these projects and sort of design attributes and the whole glamping kind of, project that are coming to life or being constructed or being looked at. And I think this is what people are willing to pay today. And at the end of the day, what we do as entrepreneurs and as an agency and manufacturers, we want to present products that clients and developers are looking for, from obviously a developer aspect to build the project, but we also need to, we want to fill these hotels for the developers. So we look at the client aspect and study that as well. And we feel that the amount that I mentioned, from $180 to $280 per key, is what people are willing to pay today for a long weekend, for a domestic traveler, and for an escape.
Okay, thank you. Here's another one. Let's see, has there been any limitations for FAR to meet MEP requirements in modular design? Might be easier, I don't know, it might be easier just to speak to the limitations you have, or the structure, the restrictions you have with MEP, I guess, if you might.
Not at all. We have no limitations. I mean, again, the outcome of what we built in modular is exactly the same as what is built in conventional. So the methodology is different, but we still follow the same steps. So in our production process, once the structure is ready, we go into the flooring, and then we go into MEP conduits. And the same MEP conduits that are used in conventional construction are used in modular construction. I think maybe the difference would be that as an example, in our current projects, we're building the project inside out. So we're actually starting with the cladding inside, and then going to MEP, and then going into insulation, and then going to sandwich panels, and then going to outside clad. So that technique might be different, and approach, but at the end of the day, the materials and the MEP approach is identical.
Yeah.
Two things.
We try to not show the MEP appliances too much, so that can be a bit challenging, because in a big building you can hide it in a service room, but if you have these units, it's a bit challenging to, like, I don't know, lower the ceiling and then have all this, for example, the ventilation, or like the air condition and so on, different ways of, but I mean, it's not very different. It is a bit more challenging, but it's not different from the traditional construction.
Okay. For me, if on the bigger buildings, I've experienced where they've actually prefabricated essentially by making sections of MEP, and then they would drop in the sections. But I'm not sure that would necessarily apply unless you're doing like a hotel tower or something. But for instance, in New York University, they would drop in sections, just of the whole chunks of the whole unit of all the MEP in one chunk and do a riser essentially and shoot it up the building in segments.
Yeah, in a hotel tower, usually the first 3 floors are done traditionally. So like a traditional construction, then you have all the services, parking houses, whatsoever, and then the hotel rooms are modular. So the bottom, the foundation is all traditional, but then all the modular units are done offsite and they're shipped there. So you could still, you know, get the MEP connected from the first 3 floors.
Okay, and then I had one more question on that question, I guess, for Jamal. How did you do the inside wall first? I'm assuming it's not drywall, right? They didn't just like let it sit out there, or they might have, I don't know. But how did you do the interior to the exterior?
Well, once we have it's a method that we're using for one of our projects now. But once we have the basically the shell, which is the structure, we're using the structure to clad the interior's walls first, and then running the conduits, and then the insulation, and then the outside. So it's an inside-out sort of build methodology. Then obviously, if there's any marine ply that needs to be applied as paint and everything, that's done in the end. But on one of the projects that we're currently doing, this is how we've built it.
Yeah, it's also for the mock-up, because then you can see exactly where you have to move the electrical sockets or switches and so on. Then it's easier to replace it if you don't have the outer cladding. But it can also be done like the exterior first and then the interior, of course. Or for example, for the towers, you do it without the cladding, and then the cladding is done on site. So you have different ways that varies on the project. It depends on the size of the project and location and so on.
Okay. Here's another one for you. In regards to UNESCO sites, what guidelines are you following, or do you follow?
These guidelines are more on the side for the developers. So what was very clear to us is that first of all, these units had to be built offsite, and therefore modular construction was the only solution. Second of all, the materials that we were using had to be sustainable and compliant with certain certificates. Third of all, ensuring that everything that is being built is in temperature-controlled environments. So these are the guidelines that we had from the developer's landowner perspective. I know that cutting down the trees was definitely a big no-no. So what they did is they brought a special sort of crane to replace the trees. Some of the trees had to be replaced to allow roads to be built to the site. And some of the materials that were used on site were restricted. But that's as far as we were involved, Mark.
Okay. What I've also heard is that you can't actually go into the ground. There are some issues with digging on UNESCO sites, that the foundations, I guess, might be affected. But potentially that was another builder putting the base in, I guess, and you guys dropped the units.
Yeah. To be honest, on this site, surprisingly, they've done quite a massive structure, which I don't understand why. I think it was totally over-engineered, but from our side, yeah, I mean, I presume that there's also a separate limitation towards how much you can excavate and go into the ground. And obviously, there are no undergrounds, no parking underground, so it's everything is built on the surface, right?
Yeah. Here's a question for Jona, but not exclusively. But what regions do you feel are the most advanced in modular, or maybe less advanced in modular and prefab? since you've actually been in quite the different markets.
Can I be biased or? Well, in my opinion, the regions that are most advanced are Scandinavia, but that's mainly because they have always used the timber construction, and with timber, it's more easy to do it offsite, because then you don't depend on under the weather condition. It rains a lot, then the wood can get damaged. So I think they have a bigger tradition of working with modular construction because of the weather condition and of the materials that they're using. So they're pretty advanced. They're doing most of the residential buildings in modular offsite, and then they ship it there. Actually, the biggest, like I used to work in Denmark, and the biggest construction company is actually modular. It's not traditional. So it is a very, I think, is the future build of construction. It takes time for the clients and other parties involved to understand it and understand the importance and how much you save, like time and money and manpower. But I think at some point you will get there everywhere. It's also pretty advanced in the US, but as I mentioned before, they mainly used to use it for social houses. So a lot of clients have their own doubts, because when they think about modular construction, they think about really low quality, affordable houses. And I mean, I think in the UAE is also getting more and more accepted. So that would be based on my experience. I don't know much about in Asia and Australia, to be honest. So maybe they're even more advanced. I can't say that.
No, fair enough. Okay. What are some particular challenges in this region that you guys are facing with modular?
I think one important one is the connotation that people are making to cheap equals to modular. I think that's a lack of understanding and education. No, so obviously, I mean, people come with budgets that just don't make sense and expect you to build for them a resort or a project or a building or whatever, and that's a challenge. Secondly, what we discussed earlier, it's quite new to the region. So even in terms of government entities understanding whether you can build a timber structure or not, these are still gray areas for approvals, whether through civil defense or municipality. And thirdly, I think what we discussed was the road authorities here that don't really allow you, unless you have special permits, to transport anything wider than what RTA approvals are, which is 3.2 or 2.8 or 3.2. So I think these are the three main challenges that we're currently facing. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of interest from, whether government developers or also a huge interest from the end user, from consumers that are looking for an extension of a villa, an extension or an addition to a majlis, that are looking for a kind of residential approach to modular.
Okay. I think that answered that one. Here's a question that, can you tell us more about RAW?
Yes. So initially, when we started Bespoke Modular Solution, every time we were speaking to developers about a design and build solution, multiple times we were asked about, okay, so who would operate and manage these hotels? And so, being an ex-hospitality guy, we said, we can bring these people or this vice president or this company and this white label. And eventually, I sat with my board and I said, why don't we just offer a design, build, and operate solution where we have a 360-degree solution towards a developer or a client? And we feel that this is quite a niche positioning in terms of the market and offering. And also that gives us the liability of building something that we can manage, which we know a lot in this region, that the contractor builds something, the operator comes on board, the day of handover. The operator doesn't know what was built, wasn't involved in design stages, and then obviously the operator wants to make changes in terms of logical kind of flow of entry and exits and experiences to clients on arrival, etc. So we are, you know, at the early stages this year of developing the raw hotels and resorts brand, and we currently have 5 signed LOIs, and we really want to go back to basics in terms of developing this brand with everything that I talked about in terms of market positioning to affordable luxury, back to basics, transformational, experiential, mind, body, and soul movement, and that's more of a passion to me and the co-founders and the board. We see this as a long-term project that we would like to retire one day on.
Great. Sounds like a good plan. Speaking to your the new tourism, the way tourism is going, the trend is going. I mean, you've spoken to the idea that the mind, body, the soul. You've spoken to the idea that people are not looking for millennials or other like-minded thinking people, I guess. Doesn't have to be millennials, but people are going and looking for an experience. They're not looking for, you know, gold-plated walls necessarily or whatever. Not looking for the Four Seasons, standard Four Seasons experience, as it were, nowadays. But how specifically do you feel like your, I would say prefab, but maybe it's your view. How is your view addressing that directly, or how do you see that as addressing the trend of this new trend? I mean, if you follow what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of this during this past hour of the conversation. But first of all, the main factors are the products that we're offering. We're not only offering a structural steel, you know, kind of cabin or prefab unit and saying, okay, it's being delivered, this is what we have to build. We're offering the domes, we're offering the tents, we're offering these really vast product line that are part of this whole transformational movement. And I mean, you can go to Tulum in Mexico and spend $600 and sleep in a tent where there's no electricity, you know. I'm not saying that this is what people are looking for in the region, but I'm saying that people are looking for different experiences, and we feel that by the products that we're offering, whether in modular, whether in containers, whether in domes, whether in tents, whether in yurts, are offering that sort of product line to developers and clients that are looking to explore this kind of market. You can easily we talked about rates earlier, but you can easily build a yurt and put it in front of, you know, one of the most spectacular sceneries in Abu Dhabi, and charge $600 a night, you know, because people are looking for the whole movement that we discussed. And as I said, the travel industry has changed a lot and will continue to change, and people want to make it a point when they're going to travel and spend money on traveling. And therefore, the activities that are offered, the experiences that are offered, the locations that are offered are extremely important. And that's what we try to contribute. And obviously the raw hospitality brand that we're developing is going to be a huge contributor to developing the movement of transformational hotels and movement.
Yeah. Design-wise, we also try to use natural materials with like natural finishes and consider the surrounding. So when you're inside, you can feel the transformation to the nature. So I think this whole package together with the design and like the different activities that we can offer to customers, like, I don't know, yoga retreat or having cooking classes that is like more modern, but like with a local heritage, all this together, I think could offer a pretty different experience to the customers.
Thank you for that. That was a great answer. That's it. Those are my questions, or those are the questions from the attendees, as well as my questions. So do you guys have anything else you want to add?
Jona?
Not on my side.
Thank you very much, Mark, and the entire MIDC team for having us on this panel today. I hope that we've managed to keep you entertained for the past hour, and feel free to reach out to us if you want to have a coffee or discuss anything else that wasn't clear during the past hour. Thank you, Mark, for putting this together and coordinating it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamal and Jona. And everyone, we'll see you at the next MIDC talk. All right, until then.
Cheers, bye-bye.
Bye.